There was two things that stood out to me about this trip. One was that I was going to run my last New York City marathon, and two, that I was going back to Brooklyn to face my ghosts.
I don't hear, I don't see anything. All I see is what's in front of me. And this time, I took everything in. And it's really weird because the whole time going over the bridge, it's like deadly silence. All you hear is feet and breathing and, the cars on the other side coming back.
Who is Epi? Like, where does he live? Everything about him. Tell me everything about him.
Anytime I picture my mother, it's always a dramatic scene. My mother was a heroin addict, and my brother and I were with her one time, and she was using heroin, and I don't know whether the shot she took was too much or had something else in it, but I remember being with my brother, and I was like 5, so my brother was 3, and hearing a thump, and running into the kitchen and seeing my mother spread out like this in convulsions with the needle sticking in her arm. My name is Epi Ortiz. I'm 48 and I was born in Brooklyn, New York. Actually, marathons, it is pretty neat because it is a representation of my life. A marathon is interesting because you have to pace yourself, and I always start out too fast. Going over the Verns on the bridge, you have the crowd and the excitement. I always get caught up in that. And then I hit my wall. And when I hit the wall, it's difficult to describe the experience. Your body just gives up. It doesn't want to move. You feel like you have to puke. You can't breathe. You can't move. And I think many times in my life, I've hit that wall. Actually, being alone was both a challenge and a blessing. What my mother would do was she would go to sleep with us, and then once we were asleep, she would take off. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night and realize she's not there. Now, the thing about my mother is when she would take off, sometimes she would come back the next day, sometimes she wouldn't come back for 3 or 5 days. And it was basically up to me and my brother to figure out what we were going to do. At the time, my brother and I, if we ate once every other day, we were doing really well. Never saw a genuine emotion from my mother with respect to love. There was always an angle. I think my happiest, and it just came right to me when I was in school. I absolutely loved school, and I remember I would get up, and I don't know how early. I knew it was early because the streets were empty. And I would walk to school, and it's about a mile and a half to school, and I'd wait in the courtyard. And I was so fascinated by the school in the courtyard, because the courtyard had these beautiful oak trees, and I would climb the oak trees, and basically I would just stay there and play by myself. I'm totally blown away by, I was this tall, smaller than them, this tall last time I was stepping right here. I didn't have to worry about my mother. I didn't have to worry about my brother. I knew I was going to go eat. So I had something to look forward to. And I remember as a little kid looking up at the sky and being like totally happy that I was there. It was heaven on earth. And I realized that other kids didn't do the stuff that I did, that they ate all the time, that they had a dad around because my father was never around, and that their mother was always around. So it fascinated me that they had that lifestyle. Another thing that my mother would do is she would leave us with friends. Again, friends didn't like us. We ended up getting beaten, and that's how it went. Well, one time she left us with friends and she never came back. So the friends take us to the police department, hand us over to the police, say, we don't want these kids, the mother disappeared, we don't know where she is. And again, this is in Brooklyn. So the police take us, they try to find out about my mother and where we live, and being 5 years old, they make sense of what we were saying. So they take us on a ride, and to me, I was totally amazed because we went over the Verrazano Bridge. And to me, it was like the bridge to heaven because it was so high and it was going to the clouds. I was totally amazed. And we went to Staten Island and they brought us to Mount Loretto. Now, Mount Loretto back in the 70s was a big farm. So we pull up into this farm and I see cottages and I see church and I see a pool and I see a gym and I see kids. And I think I'm in heaven. And we end up living at Mount Loretto at the orphanage there. All of a sudden, my mother shows up, and they're like, "Oh, your mother's here. You should be happy." And my brother and I were like, "No." And they were totally shocked that we didn't want to go back. They were like, "You're the first kids that taught us this." And I'm like, "Well, we don't want to go back." And they're like, "Oh, well, your mother's better. You should go back." And by looking at my mother, I knew she was pulling the angle. So I knew that we were going to go back to the same situation. So we're going to go back with our mother for 2 weeks. My mother never showed up, and we just continued in the orphanage. And that's how my life was between my mother and I. She would disappear for a given amount of time. I would find a family or a situation that we were happy in, and as soon as something was going to become permanent, she would show up, and everything would go to hell. That's pretty much how my childhood was. And then one night I had a dream or a nightmare where I was an old man and I was on the porch drinking beer, gawking at girls. And I woke up and the dream scared, I could say it scared me straight. And I realized that I was becoming like my mother. And I decided to change it. And right there I stopped. I left the circle of friends. I broke out on my own, and it was hard, and it was miserable because like I was by myself. My life consisted of, I would wake up at midnight to go work at UPS, and I work at UPS at 5 o'clock. I leave UPS to work a cab driving job from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then I go to college from 7 to 9, and then go home, sleep 2 hours, and start all over again.
Did you ever find out what ultimately happened to your mother?
I think she's dead. I think given the lifestyle that she led, I wouldn't doubt it. Apparently, one of the things my mother used to do when I lived with my brother and my wife, and when we were going out, I would get calls, and I would pick up the phone, and they wouldn't say anything, and I thought they were crank callers. Apparently, my mother would look up my name in the phone book and call me just to hear me, and I think she just wanted to hear my voice. I do think my mother's passed. For a long time, I had a hard time with it because I think I took responsibility for what happened to her, and I blame myself because I thought that I could save her. Even though in my head I recognize now that I can't, that this is the life she chose. I still have a very hard time dealing with it. And somebody asked me a question, and the question really bothers me. They said to me, "Do you love your mother?" I don't know. I like to say yes that I do, but I really don't know. I don't know what that is. One night, Pam showed up, and I remember thinking to myself, because I look like crap. After everything that I did and everything that happened, that she still wanted to talk to me and spend time with me. And our relationship grew out of that. I think that was the beginning of me turning everything around. She helped me to see that I wasn't a jerk. I wasn't an alcoholic or a drug addict, that I was me and that I need to accept myself for me. I think before that, I was unwilling to do that. And yeah, we got married and started a family.
So this is where I used to live, 367 Bedford Avenue. My brother and I just had our way because my mother was never around. It doesn't feel as bad as I thought it would be. Actually, I was very afraid that I would break down. But I don't think my fear of my mother or myself is as strong with me as I thought it was all those times. I think part of the reason is, you know, because having my family with me here kind of reminds me of who I am now and who I'm not. And that's the person 40 years ago.
He's everything to me. He's always there for me if I'm feeling down or if there's something on my mind. And he said to me, I couldn't be who I am today without you. And it's the same with me.
He was a support for me through probably my hardest time of depression. When I was hospitalized, he was one of the things I looked forward to most when I got to see him, and knowing that he supported me and wanted to get me back home.
Yeah, he's always been there for me, you know. As a child, growing up, going to school, going to college, and joining the Air Force, he's always been there for me.
I do love him. He's my brother, you know. And I won't forget that. And he knows me. And he's probably the only one in the whole world that really, really knows me.
He doesn't give up. He just, whenever life pushes at him, he pushes back.
For a 7-year-old boy who made it. And when I talk about making it, I'm not talking about making it like financially or career-wise. I'm talking about making it as a person.